I wouldn't say launch, because the book has been launched before, but the reading with author Jing-Jing. She is currently residing in Holland, Amsterdam. And because she's back for Singapore Writers Fest, and of course a rare chance for her to come back, so we managed to get her here to the bookstore to do a reading for us from her book, If I Could Tell You, that was published earlier this February this year. And next year we'll be publishing a collection of poetry from her also. So without any delays, I'm going to let her read an extract from If I Could Tell You, and of course she'll follow up with reading from her poems.
I'm going to read an extract from the Cardboard Ladies chapter. She is about 80 years old, and she collects cardboard for a living. And I picture her as living in one of those really tiny flats that you don't get to see anymore nowadays. If you know where to go, you will see them. But so here she is. She's just gotten home. My mother used to sing when it was too hot, and the 6 of us had to sleep pressed into each other so we could fit on a rattan mat. She would sing, her voice so thin it splintered, scattered over our heads, but it still sent us to sleep. Soft breeze in our faces. I don't remember the words, so I hum it low while I put away the bowl and cup by the sink, go to bed and lay myself down. Slow and careful. The way I put him down on the grass that evening. It was dark, and it was the right time. The shame of it goes away at night, just a little. Even now, after so many years, it seems I breathe easier in the dark, so I don't switch on the lights in the evening unless I have to sew. Every day I draw the curtains when the sun shines in mid-morning and towards dusk. I'm a thing of the dark. I wrap myself in it the way I wrapped him up years and years ago. Swaddled him in rags from the cell, then put him in the ground. That day, when I picked him up to leave, he looked half blind. His right eye only opened a crack. I was blind too, but from the sunlight, walking out into it for the first time in months, years. I scrambled backwards when the soldiers came around to unlock our cells, shouting at us in Japanese and pointing towards the main door. He motioned for us to get out, but it took me a while to realize what was going on. Only when I saw everyone leaving, all the other girls, did I lift him, his nothing body, wrapped him up in the one rag I could find. It was the only thing I had. Then I walked out, expecting any moment to be called back, to be shot. But I walked, and then I was outside, deafened by the whine of crickets playing their long, scratchy tune, their evening call. The others were standing around, waiting. Some exhausted just from walking out of there. I could hear the hiss of their dry throats, see the rise and fall of their chests, almost choking on fresh air. 2 of them, the ones who came in last, the only ones still able, went right off, torn wisps of the dresses rippling behind them. I envied their strength and imagined how fast I could run if I still had meat on their legs. Then I looked down and took in my feet, blackened, sharp with yellowed nails and bones. They ran, not looking back, and I followed them until the little needles of pain in my chest grew unignorable. Then I followed them walking, focused on planting my feet firmly in the ground, walked towards the sound of the crickets, away from the road. I told myself afterward that I had no idea what I was going to do while I was walking away. All I wanted was to get away, far as possible from the barracks, from the possibility of the soldiers coming back. It's been so many years since that I can almost believe it if I don't linger upon it too much. If I busy my hands working, and picking up things, and cooking and washing. I knew enough though, even then. I had to leave him. I knew the moment I walked out the cell. It was right by a tree, a tall, old ansana. I stopped and looked around, but there was no one. I lay him down, stayed squatting, and watched him for a while. For so long I thought I saw his lips move just a little. For a moment I thought he might cry, claim me with the sound and smell, and I wouldn't be able to leave him then. He might cry after days of keeping silent and still, like he had given up, realized I had nothing for him to eat. There was nothing of me he could have. I thought about putting my ear to his mouth or heart, but I stopped myself. What good did it do to know? Dead or dying, it didn't matter. I could never bring him home. So I stood up and stepped back. Hey! I turned around, almost tripping, and put out a hand to steady myself against the rough trunk of a tree. Then I saw someone standing some distance away. A ghost, I thought. But then it moved, and I saw it was another girl from the barracks, clutching at the front of a torn blouse to keep it closed. So thin, her trousers were almost falling off her hips. She looked about my age, was 17 at most. Hey, she said again, walking in my direction. Wait for me. Do you know the way? She said. I said nothing. Just watched her get closer, close enough to peer around me to see what was in the bundle on the ground. There were bruises on her cheekbones and a cut that was mending on her lip. She looked at me as if she knew exactly what had happened and understood that I couldn't go back like this, not with the child. You should bury it, she said. It's only proper. I raised my hands to look at them. Or rather, I felt them moving on their own. They could be paper. Paper or air, I thought, looking at them. I'll help you, she said, and she crouched down. Soon we were digging, both of us, with our fingers, scraping away the rich, dark soil so soft I imagined I could put it in my mouth, chew, and it would taste like the lunches that they used to give us in school. Rice and fried egg and even minced meat sometimes. I would chew and swallow and be full. That was what I was thinking while I dug out the hole in the ground for my child. For 5 minutes or so, the girl stopped. I think that's deep enough, she said. I was glad because I was tired and my arms were aching. I was so tired I could fall asleep right there. But I picked up the bundle from the ground, rearranged the rag so that it covered all of him, his face down to his tiny doll feet, and put him in. I'm going to read from my upcoming collection of poetry. My poetry is quite narrative in nature, most of them anyway. So I'll just start.
Before you start, right?
Yeah?
I've always wondered, I mean, not because I'm part of the show, but prose and poetry, I mean, you're comfortable with both, right? But
Yeah.
how do you manage to, was it poetry first or has it prose that came first?
I think I started writing poetry only when I was told to do so during my creative writing course. And it was only then that I was brave enough to actually try it out. And I was given the space to do so. And also people gave me feedback, which was very encouraging. And it was only from that point onwards that I started really writing poetry. I started out with prose. But I've always been quite, my writing was quite compressed. And I think that I've learned from writing poetry in a way how I should structure words and use words to the maximum of their power, I guess. And then I guess these two for me feed off each other sometimes, not all the time. Like I have a few poems that are inspired by my prose work and they're kind of linked to the prose work. But on the whole, I would say that it's quite It's quite a separate process. Yeah. But I enjoy both. Prose is a bit more challenging for me because it requires a lot of stamina. And poetry is painful but fun. Painful but fun. Yeah, that's it. Anything else? Okay. I'll just start. This one is entitled His Wishes. Every Lunar New Year, my father sat on the kitchen floor, shirtless and cursing, first making sparks with the knife on a stone, while the duck, blazed brown, head lolling to the side, waited on the cutting board. No one else could do the job. No one else cared for perfection, he said as he split the bird in half, brought his face inches from the salt skin, and lifted slivers of meat from the duck's body. Then he went for its wings, dislocating shoulders, cracking joints the way he did with his fingers when watching the news. The duck's webbed feet got their own place, fanned out on one side of the serving dish while its head went to the top of the pile. It took him 20 minutes to do this, longer each year as his eyes failed him. Once, his glasses slipped down his wet nose, dropped into the liquid pooling on the board. We ate only half the duck that year, all jagged ends and loose skin. We didn't mind, but he did. This is why you'll be nothing, he said, starting on a bit of neck as my mother brought in the other dishes, one by one by one. I smiled at the duck with its oiled mouth, and I thought of the air my feet would tread that night. The long drop, the hiss of gravity against my wings. The next one is called the River Aphrodite. I wrote this because one of my friends, he is working on a book of photography that focuses on rivers in Cyprus, and he asked me to write a few poems, and I could take away the ones that I liked, and he took some. So this is one that I took for myself. The River Aphrodite. My brother fell in Arcadia, white rafting. Took to water like fish, weighted with mess tins, 2 iron pans, 1 merino spread woven by natives continents away. While we searched, my dad spoke about mountains and faults, pointed to depths as locals dived, bringing up tent rods, a propane stove, coffee mugs scratched with other names. Years later, they found him, drinking by a fountain, clothed in that blanket, now smelling of sheep. Asked where he was from, he traced the silt on his skin. Elsewhere, he wrote, elsewhere. Okay, and the next one is actually inspired by Cardboard Lady. It's called The Interview. The reporter and my ghosts arrive in a yellow cab, and while she gropes for the fare, they climb out. I count 60 before my eyes give up. Hear them crack thunder onto the parking lot tiles. Some wore just their skin, some had trousers hooked loosely around hip bones, belt ends dangling. I brew coffee, lay out plain crackers on a plate, wait for the bell to ring. When they come in, I sit as the reporter takes out pen, paper, a microphone, and a black machine that fills up the room. She snaps a cassette into it, making the ghosts look round before they go back to touching everything. Cups drying sink-side, photos on the altar, and laundered clothes, rubbing a hand between finger and thumb. I spot a few who used to bring me sweets, and cooked rice while the others swarm around me, trying to undo the grandmother's knot at the nape of my neck. The reporter clears her throat, asks if I'm ready. I nod yes, and watch her finger sink a red button. The crack of it, like a branch breaking, my chest opening up, touching air. The next few poems are about my grandfather. He passed away about 12 years ago, but for some reason he has stayed on and in my mind and sort of inspired me to write a few poems about him and his trade. He was a tailor. So the first one is called Tailor. He had cotton hands perfect for holding washes of silk, for smoothing a length of hair, breadth, thread, a needle. Doll hands, hands sought out for pleated trousers and wedding suits made to measure. Village women, their raw-meat fingers jammed with sham gold, asked for flowers weaved impossibly close, and frock buttons in the shape of dragonflies, frozen, pinned. He worked, hunched over the black and gold singer, making it purr through the quiet. Kept his glasses even when his eyes went cataract blue. By his bed, pins, needles in their boxes, and silvered scissors so clear it flashed with its own light. The singer he gave my mother, the only one who let herself be trussed up in it. All that cloth, the trade, the family hands. One more about him. Sitting up. Sitting up is about when there's a funeral and the kids sort of take turns to look after the corpse. And I remember doing that as a 14-year-old with my cousins, and they being really, really young sort of made a game of it. They could stay up and I had to take care of them. But what they didn't really want to think about, of course, was the fact that my dead grandfather was sort of in the corner, shielded by these blankets that we have during funerals. Sitting up. My turn came on the second night, sitting up with Grandpa. Not like sitting up with a feverish child or staying up over New Year's Eve, late as possible, so your parents live and live to be 90, 100. Not even like keeping vigil bedside, switching the pillows under him every hour from left to right and back, putting balm on his cracked lips. Sitting up meant looking after the casket, keeping the stray cats away, or else we might find the coffin empty, the adults said, the dead off for a stroll. I laughed about this with my cousin, right before she fell asleep in my lap. Then I took out squares of colored paper, spent the night making cranes, stars. By morning, I could shut my eyes, feel for a corner with my fingers, and know what to do. Smooth the paper out, lift and fold. The last one is an ode to Singlish, and it was displayed maybe 1 or 2 years ago at MRT stations, and it is my love poem to the word la. It's called Word. The words snake out of my mouth before I can stop them, braiding the ends of sentences, keeping them tied up with a velvet ribbon, or left loose to unfold slowly in the hours after. Hear the difference between shut up and shut up la, the last word hiding in it the curve of a smile, making a blow land light as a kiss. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?